Hello, and welcome to the Reactor. All right, I want to do something a little different today and kind of discuss some things about censorship and growing up with a lot of different political tides in the United States, and also being subjected to many different musical styles along the way as well. And one of the biggest voices in American history is Frank Zappa, especially when it comes to censorship and creativity and the stupid things that politicians do. So Zappa was always in the limelight and going to Congress and just going on talk shows and doing what he could do to kind of spread the word of what these boneheads in office are doing. And lately, it's coming full circle, and I wish we had a voice like Zappa to go out there and do these things. So maybe by the power of YouTube, hopefully they won't ban it, but the people can hear the words spoken from 1986 and how it kind of resonates with today. So let's listen to some Zappa on Johnny Carson. See what he has to say about censorship and all that fun stuff.
Frank Zappa is certainly one of the most prolific music composers of this generation, and although most people associate him with rock and roll, the London Symphony has recorded an album of his music. He's written a book called Them or Us, and his latest album is called Frank Zappa Meets the Mothers of Prevention. Would you welcome, please, Mr. Frank Zappa?
Prevention.
Simmer down, folks. I was going to say, please welcome a national treasure, Frank Zappa. Somebody said that you had a couple experiences with that where they introduced you that way.
Yeah, well, that started off as a joke. I did the Roberta Weintraub show. I don't know whether you get up early enough to watch that.
Yeah,
but
I've seen it.
When I was on the show, they said, well, how would you like to be introduced? And I said, well, just introduce me as a national treasure. And they thought, well, yeah, sure. And so when they did it, the slide went on the screen and said, National Treasurer.
National Treasurer?
Yeah. So then a few weeks ago, I taped a panel discussion about censorship, which is coming on another network this Sunday. And they said the same thing. Well, how do you want to be introduced? And I said, well, National Treasure. And they were incensed that I would say this. I thought, well, why not give them a bad time?
Exactly.
Prior to taping the thing, they were pleading with me to change my introduction, and I said, no, National Treasure, National Treasure. And I can't remember the name of the woman who was the moderator of the discussion, but when it finally went before the camera, she said, well, Frank Zappa, who is asked to be introduced as a national treasure, but we know he's just a musician. No, it wasn't really that bad.
I have a feeling you get a great kick of putting people on, right?
Yeah.
And giving them,
You and me both.
especially nice, straight people, and they just take it and twist it a little bit.
Yeah.
A hard time.
You haven't been on with me before.
That's true.
Yeah, you were
There's
here.
probably a very good reason for that.
Why?
Well, I don't know. It's I think that sometimes shows of this magnitude tend to not want to have people who say the kind of stuff that I do sitting, on the show.
Oh, not a bit. On the contrary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find you fascinating, and I respect your opinions. I told you before the show, with that testimony in front of the committee on censorship of rock lyrics predominantly. I thought it was one of the most fascinating television I'd ever seen. You were there. John Denver was there.
Dee Snider.
Dee Snider from Twisted Sister.
Stan Gordikoff.
You want to get into that a little bit because it is so current. As you know, there was a coalition or a committee of I guess Washington wives who wanted to, as I understand it, or were trying to get lyrics censored or make record artists more aware of what they were saying. Saying in effect, I guess, that the lyrics were morally wrong, were bad for the youngsters to hear, and et cetera, and et cetera. And you went on and talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, they actually said things that were more far-reaching than that. Some of their unscientific conclusions were that rock music will make you commit suicide, that rock music leads people to become murderers. Some people have said that rock music is the major cause of incest in the home, that rock music will... This is an actual quote from one person. See, I was trying to give you an update backstage, but it was a little fast. The PMRC business that you're referring to in the Senate was last year. That was the beginning, okay? And it didn't quit. It didn't go away. This year's manifestation began with a law that was introduced in the state of Maryland, which passed through the House of Delegates 96 to something, just whizzed right through before anybody thought about it. They took the existing pornography laws as they apply to motion pictures and books and videotapes and just added the words magnetic tape, phonograph record, and compact disc to include the... This gives you the legal concept that music can be pornographic, which I think is stupid. And the law itself...
Have they ever yet, is anybody ever given a definition of pornography that makes sense to everyone?
Well, I don't know whether that has ever happened, but in the case of the Maryland law, it had some definitions built into it that applied to the visual medium. And some of them were really strange. Like, for example, it said that the purpose of the bill was to keep people from seeing or experiencing illicit sex. And then it goes on to define what in Maryland is described as illicit sex. And the first thing on the list was sexual intercourse.
That's illicit.
In the state of Maryland, apparently. So by implication, if you add phonograph records to this law, that would mean that the record can't talk about illicit sex or sexual intercourse.
Right.
So when you see that most of the love songs that have ever been written are generally aiming in that direction, and most people didn't die from that, it's going to be a little complicated. The other thing that the law forbids is advertising pornography. So that gives you a legal situation where if the law, which was defeated yesterday, 7-4, if the law would have gone into effect, a kid wearing a T-shirt with the name of a group on it that had been judged pornographic would then be liable for a $1,000 fine and a year in jail for advertising pornography.
Something is strange here.
Yeah.
Let me interrupt you a second, Frank. We have to cut away. We'll do this, but we'll be right back.
Okay.
All right, so here's the second half of the interview.
We're back talking with Frank Zappa. You know, we only have a short time tonight. I'd love you to come back again some night, but we got a couple of minutes here, and we're going to talk about a lot of other things. But this is rather, I think, important, because once you start censoring phonograph records, it's not a long step before you start to censor almost anything. And community standards is a difficult thing to explain at best. You know, what is offensive to one person is not offensive to other, and people ought to have a freedom of choice. But I guess they say because children are involved here, that they're more impressionable. And yet I've seen a lot of kids who listen to these records stand up and say, well, you know, it's just a record. It's our music, our time. No big deal.
I think that to talk about this matter and pin it to children and use the children as a tool in order to sell this political device, because I think there's a political concept behind shutting off access to certain types of information. If you can put your foot in the door by saying, we're going to stop dirty words, that literally means you put in force the mechanism to stop other ideas. Once that censorship board is there, they have to find things for themselves to do when they run out of dirty words, and they're not going to unemploy themselves.
Yeah.
And so,
All right, let me ask you, let me play like one of the devil's advocate. I'll play that for a second. The mother says to you, but don't you think, Mr. Zappa, that musicians today who have, who are in front of youngsters all the time have a moral right to not express certain things on records, that you must be careful of what you write and what you play?
well, I think that an artist's responsibility is to himself as an artist, and there is plenty of other forms of music besides rock and roll that people can listen to. Like I said in the Senate, there's instrumental music, which has no words. Why don't you try and interest children in listening to musicians? You know, you don't have to hear lyrics.
Yeah, freedom of choice is not a bad thing. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.
Exactly. Exactly. Freedom of choice. That's what we got to learn here. So I got to say, you know, some of the things he's saying now are coming back. Maybe not in the exact terminology, but very similar. So what they're reaching for in 1986 is sexually explicit lyrics leading to kids, you know, getting into trouble, you know, dying from bad lyrics. I mean, I remember when Ozzy and Rob Halford were sued for subliminal messages in their lyrics that they thought were killing kids. Kids were committing suicide, and they didn't think that maybe the parents' shitty parental skills were the cause. They blamed it on the music. And of course, after years and millions of dollars in legal fees, you know, the cases were thrown out. It was just pure garbage. So today we're having discussions about censorship, not in the sense of music, but now in the sense of social media. The United States government has just announced that they are deciding with Facebook and other social media platforms, they're deciding what the misinformation is, and they want to stop people from posting misinformation. Now, people shouldn't intentionally be posting misinformation just to lead people into the wrong direction. However, people should have the right to make up their own mind what they believe is information that they want to hear or see. So now, Zappa at the time in 1986 was very anti-conservative. So let me put this spin in here. At the time, the conservative right wing was very like the Bible Belt area. They were, you know, against, you know, swearing. They were against anything that had the word sex or intercourse or anything like that. They were trying to get rid of. I mean, look at the Brady Bunch. I mean, they slept in separate beds. You never saw them, you know, together. You know, so, you know, they did their best to ban anything that had lyrics or visuals to anything that resembled sex or swears or anything demonic or mean. You know, conservatives were a little bit wacky back then when it came to that subject, but look at now. Look at now. Now the Democratic liberal administration is in charge at the moment, and they're utilizing that same power that they had to try to limit people's speech. And what's going to happen here is laws will be passed, things will change, warning labels will be put everywhere. They're just trying to, you know, stop people from being stupid. Well, it ain't going to happen. The problem here is once these laws are passed in this administration, they're able to censor whoever they deem necessary is misinformation. The problem is, you know, the administration changes hands every 4 to 8 years. They're going to give that power to the next administration, and guess what's going to happen? They're going to use the censorship laws to decide who they think is misinformation. And as it stands right now, politically divided the United States is, it's going to be a war against who can censor who. And before you know it, there'll be nothing left for us to see or hear. Everything will be misinformation. There'll be misinformation wars, you know. It's going to get crazy. So I just got to give it to Frank here to bring it to light and to try to really go after censorship. It's really a bad thing, and people just need to have education on what misinformation is, and have an open mind, and have a brain. You decide, you know, hey, people, I mean, look at, I'll just say Alex Jones and Rachel Maddow. These are two people on opposite sides of the spectrum, but are equally as offensive. I mean, in my opinion, they take a smidgen of truth and then exaggerate it to the nth degree, and people seem to like it. Now, there are a few people out there that believe 100% that what they're saying is true, and I get the reason why you'd want to kick them off their platforms, but that's a dangerous road. That's a very dangerous road, and so I'd like to have an open discussion about these censorship laws that are happening. It's been kind of growing in the last couple of years, but now it's hit. Now the White House is going to censor people who they deem necessary is creating misinformation. So comment below. Just please be respectful. You know, I can't tolerate anyone having a negative attack on me personally or someone else that made a comment. That stuff will, you know, get kicked, even though I don't want to censor people unless they are personally attacking someone else. You can attack the subject, but just not personally, please. So, well, let me know what you think, and we'll have a nice discussion about censorship, especially because music is something that I hold dear to my heart, and I want music to be as open and free as possible, and because in an emotion, you can express whatever that is, and it, you know, it can be anything, and people don't have to come to the conclusion that you know, that they may do something harmful after listening to a piece of music. I think it just goes down a bad road. So let me know what you think, and let's discuss. Okay then, cheerio.